the New York Times still had to fill its pages. And so I came up with this idea of packing lobster and clams and partially cooked potatoes and seaweed and corn in a lobster pot. And you would give them, I think in those days, 20 years ago, it was maybe $25 additional for the lobster pot, which you would get back when you returned the lobster pot. Our clients told us, nobody's going to want to do this. Nobody's going to want to return the pot. Nobody's going to do this. And I thought, well, maybe they won't, but at least the New York Times will have something to write about. New York Times certainly wrote about it. Everybody wrote about it. They did a television special about it. It became the biggest selling product that they had. But most of all, I saw people returning those pots and coming back into the store and leaving with arms full of melons.
Welcome to Beyond the Swag. Merch is Media, the podcast where we go beyond logos, giveaways, and leftover budgets and talk about how branded merchandise actually functions as marketing, media, and brand experience. On this show, we sit down with founders, operators, and brand leaders to unpack the real decisions behind the brands you see. What works, what doesn't, and how the details people overlook often make the biggest impact. I'm your host, Kevin Patrick. This is Beyond the Swag. Welcome back to another episode of Beyond the Swag. I'm super excited for today's episode. Today we have Diane Meier from Meier and Company. Diane, give us a quick introduction of you and your company.
Well, for many, many years, I had an agency in New York City and would come up to, here I am in northern Connecticut on weekends. And at the pandemic, I closed the New York City office and came here, but retained our ability to consult and to do our work. We've worked for most really iconic companies that you understand, Kohler and Borden and Neiman Marcus and Bergdorf Goodman, Gucci, Rolex. So yeah. We actually helped to work on the branding of De Beers, the branding of diamonds, where we were told you can't brand a commodity. You can't attach any kind of logo. No one would be able to tell one diamond from the next. And we figured out how to do that. Yeah. But in many, many cases, and the reason I'm here today is because in many cases, the issue of what was often referred to as swag, rarely is it referred to in my office as swag, became part of the toolkit that we used to telegraph the change. Yeah. And I have a couple of examples here that I think are really pertinent.
Awesome. Well, I'm excited. Thank you for joining the show. And I'm excited to dive in beyond the swag. Where we don't consider it merch or swag. We talk about it all the time. Merch is media. It's a trademark of ours, and we stand to it. Where everything we talk about it all the time. Everything you put your logo on represents your brand.
Yes.
And it's how you want your brand to be perceived. And the first thing I want to hear from you is, why is branding so important? And what I mean really by that is, we see companies spend thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars on websites, their logo, their tagline, and then there's ways, whether it's swag or not, where they don't spend the effort and they spend all this money on their brand, but then go different directions with everything. Why is branding so important for business? I mean, you just talked about some big companies, Gucci. Like, why is branding? Everything we do is branding and marketing, right? But why is it so important?
I think what you just said is exactly it. Everything you do. The confusion of a logo with branding is ridiculous. I mean, branding is the way a company behaves in the world, the way it interacts with its potential consumers. And so the idea of whether the piece that you're creating is furthering that idea, not just furthering the proliferation of their logo. The proliferation of their logo means next to nothing. It has to be the right logo. You have to make sure that I don't mean to underestimate the issue of graphics. It couldn't be more important, but it isn't the package. It is an expression of the way a company or a company's products behave within the culture. And that's how your pieces, whether they're blankets or bottles or bags, have to reflect the way that company is behaving within the larger culture. That's what it's selling.
Yeah, we see it all the time. Obviously, this is what we do for a living, and we watch some of these big companies. They throw, like I said, thousands of dollars on their brand and marketing, and then they grab the cheapest items possible, the uncomfortable T-shirt that nobody wants to wear, and then like it's crazy. Like I was just at a conference in December, and I walked up to one of the booths, and I was the nerd going around and judging everybody's, promo. I was the only promo guy. I was around a bunch of home service based and tech companies and AI companies. I was the only promo guy. And I walked up and I said to the girl who was at her booth, and I said, I'm just checking out your promo items. And she was like, they suck. And that was my reaction. Exactly. In my head, I'm like, you just told me your brand sucks. Your brand's cheap. And some people look at me all the time. I get the looks all the time like, Kev, that's not what it means.
Yeah.
What if Gucci came out with a cheap pen that the first person that goes to write on it runs out of ink on the second word that they're writing? You can't tell me that it's not going to look bad on Gucci. It's like, and there's times and places for things, but go ahead.
It wouldn't be a pen.
Exactly.
I mean, why a pen? What are they saying about themselves?
Yeah, and we see it all the time. But you said swag is vital when used in further positioning. I'm curious what you mean by that.
So I can give you a couple of examples. We were working with a food retailer, high-end food retailer, looking at repositioning itself and separating itself from the grocery industry, something I think is vitally important. Yeah. Especially because there's some data that suggests that as much as 40% of this trillion-dollar market doesn't like shopping in grocery stores. You ask yourself, why are grocery stores if you put your hand over your eyes, can you tell the difference between a ShopRite and an Acme and an A&P and a Big Y? You can't.
Besides a different layout, no, you can't.
You can't, exactly, from one store from the next, even one Big Y from another Big Y. And part of that is because they take their money from the same big guys. They are selling the same big thing. They're all working off of the same data. And 60% of their customers care about that data. They want plastic wrapped material. They don't care about it. They want it inexpensively. But 40% of them do. If we were looking at 40% of a $1 trillion market in any other area that was saying, I'm sorry, I don't want to go in here. I don't want to go through an aisle that has 37 different kinds of Tide, all packaged in plastic. Yeah. If we saw that customer rejecting the idea of shopping in that environment, we would be all over it. And yet the grocery industry wasn't. So this customer came to us and said, we're very interested in looking at something different. And we identified a bunch of things, from health to provenance to transparency to behaviors, and certainly sustainability. Groceries account for something like a third of all garbage. At the end of the day, all those pyramids of tomatoes, the bottom layer of tomatoes are basically thrown out, and they're thrown out in black plastic bags, and they account for landfill. Yeah. That's ridiculous in a country like this. That's ridiculous. It's ridiculous where people go hungry. It's ridiculous where you should be selling that food. All of it's ridiculous. So the idea of turning this around became a much bigger issue than swag. It became a real issue of changing the behavior within the stores. And that's something I really want to make a point of. This is not a matter of putting a name on a blanket or a baseball hat. This is a matter of changing the behavior of a company to meet the behavior that's expected by the potential consumer, by the target consumer.
Yeah, there's a difference between ordering product and building perception.
Absolutely. So we had these bags made up, reusable bags, and inside the bag is a line that says this bag used to be a bottle. The bags were made of plastic bottles. Can you see?
Yes.
And they're good looking and they're smart and they're designed so that you use them over and over when you shop. But also we have really made the point that we've actually found, the creator of the bags has found a way to make these bottles out of garbage. So we're not just providing a bag that solves one problem. It does solve a problem. Don't expect us to give you a paper bag. But the other is that the bag that we're selling you or giving to you is a bag made from garbage. And so it's great looking. It's terrific piece of in some ways art, but even more than that, it really tells our story. Beyond that, we're in the process right now of seeing whether we can have these ball jars made with the company's name in them, so that when they sell soups or sauces, they sell them in their own jars. And then you can bring the jar back and get points toward your next purchase. Or you can get cash, whichever you prefer. But you have to come back to do that.
Right.
So you either have a jar, a shelf full of jars from our company, or you've come back and you've ordered more things.
I love that.
I discovered it kind of by accident. I discovered it because I had created a shore dinner 20 years ago for this same company that we actually did because there was so little to talk about in the middle of summer. Most of our customers were far away, and the New York Times still had to fill its pages. And so I came up with this idea of packing lobster and clams and partially cooked potatoes and seaweed and corn in a lobster pot. And you would give them, I think in those days, 20 years ago, it was maybe $25 additional for the lobster pot, which you would get back when you return the lobster pot. Our clients told us, nobody's going to want to do this. Nobody's going to want to return the pot. Nobody's going to do this.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, maybe they won't, but at least the New York Times will have something to write about. New York Times certainly wrote about it. Everybody wrote about it. They did a television special about it.
Yeah.
It became the biggest selling product that they had. But most of all, I saw people returning those pots and coming back into the store and leaving with arms full of melons and loin of pork. And so it brought them back in. It was a reason to do it. And I think the idea of being able to turn to people like you and saying, this is the problem, here's what I need to figure out a way around it. That's when we get creative. That's when we're not just slapping a name on a pen.
Yeah, and that's what we love the clients that come to us with a problem. Like, we love sitting there and creating the solution.
Yeah.
It's boring when someone's like, hey, can you put my logo on this pen?
Yeah.
Well, because in our head, we're like, well, what's that going to do for you? And yeah, like, okay, we need some pens for the office or whatever, but still, like, your employees are about to use these pens, they need to work and all that kind of stuff. And,
well, on top of it, there are 85,000 companies that can do it. They're going to take the least expensive, or
Exactly.
or even the best one they can. I'm not putting words in their mouth about how they're going to solve it, but it doesn't necessarily solve the problem of how you're telling the world that you have a different company. Well, everything I just showed you is a great example of why this company behaves.
I love it. The fact that a grocery store, we talk about the five roles of promotional products, and one of them is retention.
Yeah.
And it's not just employee retention, it's customer retention. How are we going to get these customers to come back to us? Bringing back a jar to get cash back. Who doesn't want cash back? Everybody gets credit cards so they can get cash back. Or, they use their bonus points for money off of gas or whatever the case may be. And now they're bringing it in back into a grocery store.
Absolutely.
Like, think about that for a second.
And it means that you're not taking away a plastic container and throwing out that plastic container that becomes landfill. That's where it starts. It starts with, here's our commitment. We're going to make this harder for ourselves. We have to clean these. We have to sterilize them. We have to give them to you. We have to package our soup ourselves. We have to do all of these things up. But it's that important because we believe we're a better community leader than not for doing this.
Sustainability has by far increased over the last couple years, where companies are paying more attention to it, paying attention to what products are being made of, the chemicals that are being used during those processes. How can we reuse products on a daily basis? Why do you think brands do it wrong? Or get it, I shouldn't say do it wrong. I'm sorry. I should say get it wrong. Why do you think most companies? Because we both know there's probably more companies out there that get it wrong than get it right. Why do you think that is?
I think you're looking at it from the viewpoint of swag, and I'm telling you they get it wrong across the board.
Oh, it's definitely across the board. I mean, obviously I want the swag piece of it because that's what we do and that's what this show's about. But it is across the board. We see it. I mean, we see it all the time. A good colleague of mine, she's actually going to be on the show. She's in the next couple shows. She's a digital marketing agency. And, we constantly, great colleague friend of mine, we're texting back and forth and calling and, we're joking about the people that want $500 websites and, and all this other stuff. And hey, I mean, we get it. People, and again, this is coming back to swag, but people come to us and they're like, hey, can you print some t-shirts? Sure. Absolutely. That's what we do, right? What do you want on it? We want our logo. Okay. Well, do you have your logo? No. Well, okay. So now we need to create you a logo. And, but they want a logo for $5. Yeah. And I'm like, well, go to Fiverr and then come back to me and I'll print it for you.
I think that many of the companies we talk to, and we're even when we're talking to really, for the most part, I'm not saying that we've never done small things. We do small things all the time. Yeah. I don't bother talking about them because you've never heard of their names. They dominate their categories, however, and I think that's really the important issue. When they come to us, they're looking at competitors and they want to do what the leaders in those categories have done instead of finding their own category. And they're going to make mistakes if they do that. They're going after the wrong fish. You know what I'm saying? They're not fishing in the right way. If everybody's fishing for cod, don't fish for cod. Go find the thing you can do that's better than everybody else. Because I'm telling you, there's some part of that market, either the cod market where everybody's doing it the same way, and there's a as we were talking about with the customer who's turning away from traditional grocery, somebody has to stand up and say, we have an alternative. If we're talking about, I can tell you a story where we used swag in a great way. We had an American designer who sold $50 million alone to Macy's and was positioned in the junior sportswear area. The president of their company said to me, I can't risk $1 of that $50 million sold to Macy's, or we can't keep the doors open. But I will never get a license if we are on the junior sportswear floor. I will never be in Bergdorf's. I will never be in Bendel's. And the issue of how we moved them became an issue of how did you do this beyond what the competition was doing? How did you do this in a way that said, we're going to go around this.
Right.
And we, in fact, aligned ourselves with artists, with major artists, including, do you remember how Christo wrapped the bridges and the buildings and did the wonderful walkway in Central Park? He did a project called the Surrounded Island Project off the coast of Florida, where he wrapped these islands in shocking pink, buoyant material, so they almost looked like eggs. It required a team of hundreds and hundreds of workers. And so we had my client make all of the costumes for the workers. And we went to essentially a swag manufacturer and worked with them to have these costumes made that told our client's story, but told it in the voice of the artist.
I love that.
And it was all over the news. It made the front page of the New York Times. We wrapped all of the press material in the same silk in which he surrounded the islands, and we tied it up with turquoise knot, the way he had used his surrounded island materials. And the person on Good Morning America said, I'm never going to open, he had our material, and he said, I'm never going to open this. This is clearly worth something.
Yeah.
That's awesome. You can't pay for that. And part of that was by saying we cannot do what the competition is doing. So to get back exactly to your question, why do they make that mistake? Because they look at what everybody else is doing and they try to do the same thing. And in many ways, they should be looking for somebody who's able to guide them out of that lane.
Yeah. And I mean, obviously there's ways, in business of, a monkey see, monkey do. And, especially when you're a small company, like, hey, I'm watching this big company, like, I want, they're doing these processes and stuff. And there are things that you want to do what the bigger people are doing. But there's also...
I saw something on LinkedIn yesterday about the idea of limiting the number of people in retail and making up for their loss with technology. There is no one who's more bullish about technology than I. I use it constantly. I use AI and agentic AI in almost everything I do. But it's only as smart as me. It's only as smart as what I prompt it to do. This isn't about replacing somebody who makes what I make with somebody who's $30,000 a year. The issue that's going to move you is going to be giving tools to people of huge skill. Maybe you need fewer of them, but you need people who are paid very well, who have enormous instincts, great background, a lot of experience, and know how to use these tools. So I think when I'm looking at this piece that was in LinkedIn, I'm also looking at a failed retail environment. It's every day has another awful story. There's almost nobody succeeding. And so it isn't as though we can look at these guys and say they're doing everything right. They're moving their money between banks. They're not actually solving problems for consumers. And your issue is literally about translating what is essential about that company to that consumer. Yeah. If you don't have somebody who's watching the consumer, who's only caring about the banker, then you don't have someone who's really watching what you do.
Yeah. I love the piece you were talking about with, using the story behind it to create, a project out of. And we do it a lot. Like we do, one of our biggest sellers is custom polos, where we will take a business and we will have conversations and ask them their story. What's the background of your company? What do you guys do? What machines do you sell? Or what is the case? And we take that story and turn it into a pattern and print it on a golf polo.
That's so good.
And instead of having, and I say this as I'm wearing a basic quarter zip with my logo on it, but instead of, everybody does this. Now you can create a polo, you can create a quarter zip, you can create a hat, you can create a sweatshirt that actually tells your brand's story.
Yeah.
And instead of doing the same thing, now when you hand out and you go to a trade show and you hand something out, it's different. It stands out to people. And you know, I was having a conversation with an industry colleague, and you know, we're talking about, you know, these things, and we just did a self-promotional product project that we were going to a bunch of roofing companies, and we got custom chocolate bars, and the chocolate bars had engraved to make it look like roofing shingles, and we had the wrapping on it, and obviously it had our logo on it, and the back of it, it was, you know, OSHA not approved but dentist approved. It talked to who we were sending these to.
Right.
And we put a bunch of candy bars or chocolate bars on a wooden pallet, a 4x4 wooden pallet, and made it look like a pallet of roofing shingles. Had them, you know, had 2 rubber bands on it, you know, saran wrapped it, made it look like it was a shipment of roofing shingles, and we sent it out to a bunch of companies, and the return on it was way beyond I expected.
So I would suggest that on your own T-shirt,
Sure.
that you need to say something like, we're the group that finds the difference. We're the group that
Yep.
that you know, you need to tell your story
Sure.
on your pieces.
And some of them do. I wore a terrible example to talk about this story on today's show. Some of them do. We have polos actually being made right now that tell our story. They have a bunch of different, you know, promotional products on them, like, because that is what we do. And on the inside tag, it has something along the lines. I'm going to keep it a secret because they're still in production right now. But, you know, those are things that we send out. But the industry colleague was like, oh, you know, we were thinking about, you know, getting spec samples, you know, to ship out and everything. And I said, well, why do you think our project, and not to toot my own horn, worked?
Yeah.
It's because it was different. Nobody else does that.
Well,
This product that we
it's
created,
different. It's because it told your story.
it told our story, and it told the client, and it told the client's story. It was relatable to them. It wasn't a product that is in our industry leaders database of, you know, 1.7 million products. No.
So many years ago, we did a project for an electrical engineering firm, one of the biggest in the world, and they needed something that moved their story along. They needed material, and I said, "What is it that makes your company so successful?" And the owner said, "We do our jobs on time and we do them in budget." And, well, who's going to tell me they don't do that? I mean, even if they don't, they're not going to say that. It took me 2 days to finally have him, in anger, say, "Look, this firm did the very first Bell Labs building, and last month it finished a huge part of NASA." Okay, now I've got the name of the firm from Bell Labs to NASA. There's your point. And there's nobody, whether they see the team on a golf links, or they see the team, or they see it on a hat, or they see it at the end of a brochure that's sent out in Abu Dhabi, they understand that this is a company with almost 100-year history, and that's been able to work all the way from originally working with Alexander Graham Bell all the way through to the latest degree of technology, and told in a single story, and told in frustration, told, why are you asking me this? I'm telling you what's important, but it wasn't.
We touched on it a little bit. I want to just get quick back into this one.
Sure.
How can merchandise actually shift how a brand is perceived? And it can go both ways. We talked about it a little bit earlier with cheap pens for Gucci. That's not going to make Gucci look very good, and it's not going to be a good use of Gucci's money.
Yeah.
But it could go both ways. It could be really, you know, very positive, just like the situations you were talking about earlier with the grocery store. How can merchandise actually shift how a brand's perceived?
Well, I mean,
have you seen something that has made that transition through quality or intentionality of, you know, their merch or swag?
Many times. Well, I don't know whether it's other than what I talked about, because I think that the issue of creating a shopping bag, for instance, that is really chic, that looks fabulous when you use it, that reflects if we didn't do it on a cheap and ugly bag, We did it on a great looking bag. We had the designer who did the bag has won the National Graphic Arts Award. He's won 2 or 3 James Baird Awards. He's a massively important designer for food. So every part of that told the story that this is really high end and this is really great was in place. The other side of it is that we were using a material that told that story, that told the story of how you turned garbage into something positive, that suggested you use this instead of asking us to give you paper bags. Every part of that was part of the process. And I think that if we had done a cheap bag, a plastic bag, bags that could just be thrown away or just stuck their names on paper bags, we would be doing exactly what you're saying, which is to say we're not in it to solve the problems. We're showing our hand at maybe talking a good show, but not behaving as such. The idea of the jars as opposed to putting things in plastic, I think is a really good example. So a bunch of plastic pens that are going to be thrown away, what does that tell us about the level of intent for sustainability from the company we're talking about?
Yeah, and we see it a lot where, brands come up with this story, whether it's for marketing or for their brand or whatever the case may be, and they have this great story. Mm-hmm. But then they don't fully, and they invest all this time into creating this story, but then they don't go all the way with the bags or the jars. And it doesn't get the reach that they wanted to, that they could, because a lot of people, and we hear it a lot of time, a lot of people think swag is a waste of money.
Yeah.
And it is when you don't do it right. And I'm not saying, go out and buy $100 pens. There's an investment within reason. But like you said, if you guys went out with plastic shopping bags with this story, this intent, you weren't getting the return that you guys expected.
Exactly right.
But because you did it right, and could you have done it better? Maybe. But where you got it, it worked, and you got the return. People were coming back with these jars and, getting money back or refilling their soup. And, it just brought that retention. But it's because they invested in it. I've posted this thing on Instagram or on LinkedIn a ton, where you buy 500 $5 t-shirts, or you buy 50 $50 t-shirts.
Mm-hmm.
Which one's generating the better return? Some people think it's volume. But if it's volume of crap or cheap that people aren't going to wear, it doesn't do anything. But people think, if I get volume, I get higher impressions, I get higher reach. But it's not always the case.
But nor is necessarily the $50 t-shirt, where we simply don't know what their issues are.
Sure.
The problem that I see is that this isn't an issue of how much they're spending. This is an issue of what their goals are. And how do the things that you and I come up with solve the stumbling blocks or the challenges that they have? Because there are ways that we can do that. And I think now with the proliferation of social media, now with the idea that everything somebody touches, everything somebody sees, has to be a part of that solution. There are a handful of us who've known it our whole careers, and I hope that there are more and more people who are really coming to it on a daily basis, because I think it is everything.
Yeah. Yeah, we see it in the industry a lot. This industry has become very, and it's across the board, it's become very reactive.
Yeah. Where
clients come to businesses and like us, and I need 500 t-shirts. And people are like, okay, here's our catalog of t-shirts.
Well,
and there's no deeper discovery.
Sometimes they need 500 t-shirts because they have a bunch of worker bees who have to be identified in the crowd.
Sure.
And that's a legitimate issue. And you want a fair price. What is it going to take to not look tacky and have these people be identified as being part of my company, so that I don't look out and see, where are my workers? That's a legitimate issue.
Sure.
But they have to tell you that issue. If this is about, I want these 500 T-shirts to go out and say something about my company, that's not just about hiring T-shirts.
Yeah. No, absolutely. You're 100% right. And we won't. I don't want to say we won't. Like, we always ask the questions, and we get a lot of people that they don't respond to us because they don't want to ask questions. They just want to buy T-shirts, and that's fine. Yeah. There's plenty of other people that are going to go out and just take your money. And there's the big guys. I mean, there's plenty of them. I just put a post I vented the other day on LinkedIn, and I didn't call any of them out, but I'm sure I was not very popular with them, because there's plenty of them. I'll buy 100. You could buy 100 T-shirts for $399. Go ahead.
But there are ways you can help a small insurance company. There are ways you can help a small car dealership. I can do the same.
Yeah.
And I'm open to doing the same. We can do it. Maybe it'll take us 1/10 of the time it would take to turn around Kohler, but we can do it. But they've got to want it. They've got to ask the right questions. If they want to know how to really make a difference with their business, how to really come out ahead of the competition, I think you and I can do that. But they have to be asking the right questions. If all they want is to do what everybody else is doing, we already know the answer.
Yeah, we see it like a lot with service-based businesses, of getting T-shirts and hoodies and hats, and again, what, like you said, we got to fit out our team, but at the same time, we're creating. If it's a one-day event, okay, deal with it for 8 hours, deal with this shirt. But if you're asking your employees to wear the same type of shirts and hats and hoodies, like, we got to look at it like a little bit like we don't want the uncomfortable shirts you're making your employees wear. No. And they're sweating and they're working in and they're uncomfortable. Like, no, we need and I'm not saying go out and buy Gucci T-shirts for a plumbing company, where they're just going to destroy and ruin them. But having that process and having that thought of creating stuff that one is going to represent your company. I can't tell you how many times I see contractors out there, and it's like 8 o'clock in the morning, and I see them in the grocery store at Wawa, gas station, and they look like they were rolling in mud all night long, and their shirts are dirty and oil.
But even if they're saying we've got a one-day event, the issue is, what's the goal of that one-day event? The issue of whether they want their staff. I was at an event at Memorial Sloan Kettering the other day. They've moved all of their staff to navy blue. They have a whole great variety from sweatshirts to zip-ups to sweaters to cashmere to polo shirts to T-shirts to things that look like, if they were pale blue, they'd look exactly like what all of your nurses look like.
Yeah.
But they're navy blue, and they're wearing them over turtlenecks, and they all look buttoned up. And Memorial Sloan Kettering is very, very tightly drawn right here. Yep. It's so smart, and everybody, even though they're wearing completely different things, they look totally coordinated. They look incredibly polished, and they're all comfortable. So you have 200-pound people wearing one thing, and you have little 80-pound, people wearing others. But they're all dressed in navy blue. They're all dressed in ways that look clean and clear. They're not wearing things that look like.
Yeah, it's the perception. It's the perception that we talked about. These, they're legit. They're, if you had two roofing companies that showed up at the same exact time, and one is in uniform looking, the part, and the other one getting ready to give you a quote, it's a bunch of guys in white, beaters and, a mess and not in uniform, which one do you feel more comfortable ordering or having work with you?
That's right.
Probably the one in uniform.
That's right.
And it's, and we talk to people all the time about it. It's like, your first impression is everything. And that's, your first impression on your website, your first impression on, your social media, if that's where they see you. Like when someone comes to your house, like when they step out of the car, do they look the part or do they look sloppy?
That's right.
And yeah, some people don't care, but a lot of them do. Because especially in home service, trust is everything.
Well, they certainly should know that their customers care.
Sure.
And that's really where it is. That's
all that matters.
How is the customer you're going after different from the customer your neighbor's going after? And let's make sure we're talking their language.
Yeah. It's all about building trust and perception. And, if you build trust, I said it on a podcast episode before, like roofing companies aren't out there trying to sell a roof. They're trying to sell trust.
Yeah.
That they are the best roofing company for this client's needs at this time.
That's exactly right.
And if you're selling a product, you're selling the trust that this is the product, this is the best solution that this e-commerce person is looking for. That's everything. Everything we do is sales and marketing, and it's showing that we are legit and that you can trust our product, our service, whatever the case may be.
Exactly.
Where do you think branded merchandise is headed in the next 3 to 5 years?
I don't know, because I worry that American business in general is looking more at banking than it is at customer service, and that's a worry. We might as well open the door for China. I have a nephew who's working with a Chinese company now, and their attention to detail, their attention to care, their attention to whether he's happy, their ability to take stuff back, everything about it is exactly the opposite of what we think the Chinese manufacturing is about, and certainly the opposite of where I think American business is going, which appears to be distancing itself from consumers. However,
I could not agree more. I deal with China companies a lot, and it's the way the way you're traded. And yeah, you get some that you got to butt heads with, but that's business, right?
Absolutely. But for the most part, they really are learning that making us happy, keeping us happy, solving our problems is what this is about. And if we believe in a capitalist system, if we believe in this country, I hope that somebody raises their head and says, wait a minute, we've really got to deal with how we are serving. And serving, I think, is the operative word. How are we serving these consumers and making them a hugely important part of the decisions we're making? I believe I've made a whole career on the fact that it all waters down to every little detail, and every little detail in the way our clients, our customers behave in the world comes down to your part of the equation. How do we give them the tools that are really going to move this ahead?
Absolutely. If you could give one piece of advice as someone who's helped some big brands, obviously with their brand, their perception, their value, if you could give one piece of advice to big companies, small companies, startups, brand new, regarding the how do I want to phrase this? I kind of lost my train of thought there for a second. Their brand value, like how they're not just merchandise. I mean, obviously that's what this show's about, but taking that step to building that perception.
I think it's all the same. I think the issue is understand your customer and understand what issues your customer may have with making a direction toward your brand. So I can give you a good example. We handled the wall covering division of Borden, a major manufacturer. They actually had found themselves in the wall covering business because they supplied the wall covering glue, but they wound up buying 11 wallpaper manufacturing brands.
Yeah.
And And one of the things we discovered really early and almost by accident was how difficult it is to buy wallpaper. You have a line of books on the wall, and they have names like Bee's Knees and In a Country Garden. Do you have any idea whether that's what you want in your bedroom? No. So we designed books that had little icons on the back that showed little squares that showed the kinds of patterns that were in it. We designed the names around towns or cities or places, locations, where you'd be able to see this is English country, this is Italian palazzo, this is New York townhouse, this is... We made the choices so much more specific than things like Bee's Knees. And we showed them both the coloration and the kinds of materials that they were going to find. Well, what an enormous surprise to find that within a year, they were the biggest selling wallpaper brands in the country, in the world.
Yeah.
And all we did was solve those problems. So I'm saying go back to where your customers live. Figure out what their challenges are. They're often not solving problems by going to a competitor. They're often solving problems in ways that you haven't even imagined by going around those problems.
Yeah.
And I think that the issue of how you deal with all of those ancillary products that you can then supply often come out of that kind of inquisition.
You couldn't have said it any better. You couldn't have said, I mean, no, seriously, like to fit this show, right? The whole purpose of this show is to show that when you can put thought, when you can put strategy behind the things that you do, and you can show intent with everything that you do, and I mean everything. It's not just, the branding and the marketing, right? We show so much intent in those things, but it's the merchandise and anything in branding. You can get the results that you are intended, but you have to go all in.
Yeah.
And that is why we created this show. Is obviously we keep telling people you need to go beyond, and you can think about it, but we want to bring in people like yourself to show people, no, like you actually do need to kind of listen to us. Like we're not just saying this for a sale.
Yeah.
Like we're saying this to help you. Like we talk about it all the time. I hate the word vendor. Like I don't want to be your vendor. I want to be an extension of your marketing team. Like we joke around all the time, like chief swag officer.
Uh-huh.
Like, and like it's corny and like we have fun with it and whatnot, but like we want to be an extension of all of our clients. We want to work with you. We want to get your merchandise or your marketing calendar and see what you have planned up. We can't stand when people are like, hey, we go to the same conference every October and here we are September and we need this. Guys, we've known every year we're going to this conference.
We did for the same customer the same food customer. We had this I can't think of another word to use besides swag, so I'm sorry to do it, but we had this,
it's okay.
the swag vendor who'd worked with us on the bags and the bottles. He brought me an insulated and terrific looking bottle that could be refilled. And he said, it occurred to me that he said, my teenager walks around with a dozen plastic bottles of water a day, drinking and drinking and drinking water. All she has to do is go to a tap and fill this up. And that eliminates all of those bottles being thrown away. Well, yeah. Wow. We immediately redesigned that bottle. We created a bottle and we sold it in the store. I mean, there's a great example of the vendor thinking ahead to the kinds of problems I was looking to solve, coming up with a variety of solutions, and telling me what I needed to give my design team to be able to facilitate it.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, Diane, thank you so much for being on this episode. It was a pleasure learning from you, but also having you on the show.
I'm so pleased to do it. Anytime. Call me anytime. Great.
Awesome. That wraps up this episode of Beyond the Swag, Merch is Media. If this conversation made you think differently about how your brand shows up, that's the point. Because merch isn't just a product, it's a message and it's media. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone who should hear it. Thanks for listening. I'm your host, Kevin Patrick, and I'll see you on the next episode of Beyond the Swag.